The anger at government is palpable and real. The determination to rid Washington of incumbents from both parties who voted for the Patriot Acts, who voted for TARP and the other bailouts is fervent. But the most interesting phenomenon I've discerned amongst the Tea Parties is the passion for the Constitution and an overriding interest in understanding exactly what the Constitution means and how it is supposed to restrain the government. In one of my books, The Constitution in Exile, How the Federal Government Has Seized Power by Rewriting the Supreme Law of the Land, I trace the movement of the federal government from its concerns about individual liberty to its fixation with governmental power. The Tea Party folks are very serious-minded individuals. Not since the time of FDR has there been such a great national debate on the constitutional role of the federal government in our lives. And there has never been, as far as I know, so organized and passionate a movement pushing for a smaller role for the government, one closer to the vision of the framers. These folks are not George Bush Republicans. They are Barry Goldwater Republicans. They will withhold votes from big government Republicans because they want to shrink the federal government no matter who is running it. Joining me now is Lew Rockwell, chairman of the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. Lew, it's always a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Judge, great to be with you as always.
So yesterday I was in Texas ready to speak to 1,000 Tea Partiers, many of whom believe exactly as you and I did, and as I summarized in the interim, when the governor of Texas showed up and decided he wanted to introduce me. Now, of course, the governor of Texas is not one who shares a lot of these views, but it highlighted to me, and it will to you, the dilemma that the libertarians in the Tea Party movement face. Question: should they run third-party candidates and run the risk of diluting what Republican strength there is? Or should they try to co-opt the Republican Party and bring it closer to its Barry Goldwater roots?
Well, I think they could do both, but diluting the influence of the Republican Party seems to be a very good thing. So I think it would be a great thing to have a new third party. It's very difficult to get on the ballot, of course, they're always trumpeting that they're bringing democracy to other countries, but it's very difficult for anybody besides the two wings of the predator state, the Democrats and the Republicans, difficult for anybody to oppose them. But I think there's, as you pointed out, amazing things going on in the grassroots, and people are not going to be satisfied just with tossing out a Democrat and putting in a Republican, or tossing out a Republican and putting in a Democrat. They want something different.
As you know, I have spoken to many of these groups, and as you also know, because we've talked about this off the air, I wander into the crowds, and I talk to them about the things that interest them. And even at a couple of these, though the crowds are normally massive, we do a Q&A, and I'm amazed at people that suddenly understand the Constitution. Where were these people when George Bush was president? Where were these people when the Patriot Act was being enacted? Where were these people when the Congress was granting retroactive immunity to the telephone companies that allowed FBI agents and other federal agents to spy on us in direct contravention to numerous criminal laws written to stop it?
Well, I think they were AWOL, and part of the reason is Ron Paul hadn't run yet. So I think the emerging of the Ron Paul movement, also the Napolitano movement, has made these people interested in things like what the Constitution actually says, how the government is violating, and how we have really a very authoritarian state, nothing like what the framers had in mind.
Right. And
people are learning, they're reading, they're angry, and it's a great sign. And I don't think, I'm all for, say, tossing out, your previous guest, all for tossing out McCain. I think it'd be a very good thing. Not that Hayworth, I think, is all that much better, but it's good to toss out the bums that are in there now, Republicans or Democrats. But that's not the answer. The answer is not to replace McCain's with Hayworth. The answer is something entirely different, Ron Paul, Napolitano kind of people. I hope the Tea Parties are able to achieve that, but certainly in Washington they're dedicated to suppressing the Tea Parties, controlling them, making sure that they just follow the neocon line.
Right.
So we have to hope that doesn't happen.
I think as we speak, the Tea Party leadership is being assaulted by neocons who are trying to infiltrate it and being lectured to by the Republican national leaders who want to control it. Do you suspect, Lew, or do you predict that we will go through a very, very difficult period of sort of purifying the Republican Party, the consequences of which will be fewer people in the government to resist the Democrats? I mean, look, we were saved from socialized medicine by the election of a liberal Republican in Massachusetts who's only opposed to socialized medicine because it's being proposed by a Democrat. If George Bush had proposed the very same thing, this Republican and many others would probably have voted for it.
Well, that's true. And, of course, this guy has bragged that he helped bring about the Romney Plan in Massachusetts, which is state-level socialized medicine. So, it's just a partisan thing. But I'm glad to see Obama opposed, of course. I'm glad to see Obama stymied in anything he's doing terrible things overseas and to us here domestically. But I think the answer is not just to replace these guys with the Republicans. As, of course, you pointed out, look at what the Republicans did under Bush. They were terrible. They were the same as Obama. But, something very interesting happened when they passed TARP. Every single American, Republican, Democrat, man, woman, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, north, south, east, west, everybody was opposed to that TARP bill. And yet they shoved it down our throats, even though they all admitted the American people didn't want it. So right. I think that was a revolutionary moment. I think when we look back at the changes that are coming, and they're going to be setting some wonderful, maybe chaotic changes, but some wonderful changes, it was the TARP business, all the media, with the exception of a few people like you, campaigning for this thing. Otherwise, the world was going to come to an end unless we gave $700 billion to the big banks.
Yesterday, when I was speaking to a Tea Party in Dallas that I mentioned to you earlier, and in fact, when I speak to the Tea Parties all around the country, the biggest applause line that I get is when I remind these folks that the states formed the federal government and not the other way around, and consent freely given to the federal government could freely be taken away. Is there a chance that enough courage exists in enough state houses to say to the federal government, here's a line and you can't cross it?
Absolutely. I think people are looking at Thomas Jefferson and James Madison's principles of 1798 and the Virginia and the Kentucky resolve about how if the federal government is proposing to do something unconstitutional, which of course is virtually everything they do these days, a state government can interpose itself between the federal government and the people of that state to block, to nullify that unconstitutional law. So there's talk about all this all over the country, tremendous interest in it. I'm very optimistic that we're going to see some states absolutely stand up to the federal government.
I am as well. I hope the Tea Party folks stand firm, Lou. It is they who should co-opt the Republican Party. The two George Bushes destroyed the Republican Party and obliterated the meaning of conservative Republican. The Tea Party folks are the real believers in the primacy of the individual, the necessity of limited government, the value to human advancement of the free market, and the ironclad fidelity to the Constitution. And unless Republicans return to those Goldwater-esque views, Lou, they will enter the dustbin of history, and deservedly so. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. They need to read Ron Paul books, your books, Tom Woods books, and follow what you guys are saying. Then we've got some very good changes ahead.
Thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch, Lou.
Bye-bye, Judge.
You can catch today's show on foxnews.com/freedomwatch and on Sirius 145, XM 168, or online at foxnewstalk.com at 6 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. From New York, defending freedom. Until the next time, stay free, America.